Namaste and good morning to you all. My name is Karthik Ravishankar, and on behalf of the Hindu Temple Society of North America in Flushing, New York, we welcome you all to Let's Talk Science, Session 2, brought to you by the Akshayam Group and presented by the students of the Ganesha Patasala. Today's topic will be the California wildfires. The students have prepared some impressive presentations for you all to discuss the various environmental and scientific implications of these events, with topics ranging from the composition and effects of fire all the way to a full-on data simulation of wildfires. The students have captured a wide variety of information for us today. Before we get started with the program, we would like to welcome Sri Chandrasekhar Velur to introduce our opening prayer.
Namaste. We start with 3 Omkars. Om. Shuklam Baradharam Vishnum Shashivarnam Chaturbhujam Prasannavadanam Dhyayet Sarva Vignopashantaye Saraswati Namastubhyam Varade Kamarupini Vidyarambham Karishyami Siddhar Bhavatu Me Sada Guru Brahma Gurur Vishnu Gururdevo Maheshwarah Guru Sakshat Param Brahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Anoraniyan Mahato Mahiyan Atma Guhayam Nihitosya Jantoh Tamakratum Pashyati Vita Shoko Dhatu Prasadaan Mahimanamisham Sapta Prana Prabhavanti Tasmaat Sapta Chiras Samidas Sapta Jihvaha Sapta Ime Lokaye Chucharanti Prana Grihaya Shabita Sapta Sapta Atas Samudra Girayascha Sarve Smatsyantate Sindhava Sarva Rupa Atascha Vishvavoshadhayo Rasacha Enaisha Bhutastishtatyantaratma. These verses were taken from Yajurveda and Rigveda. It starts with Anoraniyan Mahato Mahiyan. The meaning of that is smallest of the atom to the biggest of the mountains, human intelligence can excel and control. February 28th is celebrated in India as the National Science Day in memory of great Indian scientist Sir C.V. Raman. Hindu temple takes great pride in celebrating the legacy of science-filled Hindu religion through these young speakers. May Mahavallabhanapati bless the speakers, teachers, and organizers. Let the humanity be filled with peace. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And now, without much further ado, we will begin our program. I'm sure you guys are all very, very excited to hear from these young students. So our first topic will be fire and its effects, and it'll be presented by Pranati Bhatt.
Namaste everyone, I am Pranati Bhatt. As a class, we are looking at the fires and the effects of them. We looked at the factors of the California wildfires. We looked at it since it was big news. I will be talking briefly about fires in general. So let's start. Fires. What are they? How do they form? What's the chemistry behind it? So, some basic facts about fires are that fires are strong, fires spread fast, and that fires are super dangerous. Today, I will go into greater detail in the process and results of fires. So, fire is the result of combustion of organic material when oxygen is present. For an example, the chemical equation for the combustion of natural gas is methane and oxygen forms carbon dioxide and water. Natural gas is also known as methane. Natural gas is an organic material. So the components. So in order for there to be fire, there needs to be these three components: fuel, oxygen, heat. Super important. Each one of them is equally important, and a fire will not occur if even one of them is missing. Let me explain these components in a bit more greater detail. So the first component is oxygen, as I said earlier. Oxygen is present in the air we breathe. Fire cannot happen without the presence of oxygen. The second component is fuel. Fuel can really be any substance that burns. For an example, paper, wood, leaves, etc. The third component is heat, of course. Heat is what starts the chemical reactions of fire and keeps the reactions going. The triangle. So together, all these three components are known as the fire triangle. Here's a picture to help you see it. So the chemical reactions. So the chemical reaction is called combustion, as I mentioned earlier. Here the oxygen in the air reacts with any type of fuel found in a forest. Let's take wood as our fuel. When wood is heated to higher temperatures, 149 degrees Celsius, either with a match, friction, lightning, or really any other burning material, the heat decomposes some of the cellulose that makes up the wood. Smoke. At these high temperatures, some of this decomposed material is turned into gases, which we know as smoke. The smoke is made up of substances that contain carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. What is left? Char, which is nearly all pure carbon. The char is what we call charcoal. It burns without giving off any smoke. Ash, which is made up of minerals in the wood, such as calcium, potassium, etc. Before and after. So below is a diagram showing the process of fire from start to finish, ending as ash. You can take a look at it. Here's a recap of what we learned so far. Fire happens when a chemical reaction called combustion occurs. Combustion is a chemical reaction in which substances combine with oxygen. This chemical reaction releases a lot of energy in the form of heat. Combustion is accompanied by high temperature and usually light. The triangle. Let us circle back to that fire triangle that we saw earlier. Take a look at it once again. I will now go into greater detail about these three components of these fires and how they make up the triangle. You can take a look at it again. So the first component is oxygen. Oxygen is the second most common substance in the Earth's atmosphere. The atmosphere contains approximately 21% oxygen and 78% nitrogen. If there was any less oxygen in our atmosphere, there wouldn't be enough to keep a fire going. And if there was too much oxygen in our atmosphere, then striking a match to light your campfire would spread the fire uncontrollably. Oxygen for wildland fires comes from the oxygen in our atmosphere. It is because the atmosphere has just the right amount of oxygen to allow combustion and the right amount of nitrogen to hamper combustion that fires on this planet burn as they do so. Fuel. Another component, which is the second component, is fuel from the fire triangle. Generally speaking, fuel is any material that can burn. The materials that fuel wildland fire are simply those materials that are found naturally in the forest. For an example, those fuels are the natural debris and litter on the forest floor, the grasses and brush that grow amongst the trees themselves, of course. And because people have made the decision to move into woods and build houses, their homes can actually be fuels for fires too. Heat. Lastly, heat is a component of the fire triangle. A wildland fire can't start without the source of heat, of course, which we call an ignition source. A natural ignition source is lightning. Several human-made ignition sources exist, such as campfires and fireworks. Human-made ignition sources are what we have control over. The reactions. Combustion is an exothermic reaction, which means that the chemical reaction occurs with the release of heat. Once one of these initial heat sources starts a wildfire, the heat from the combustion reaction is what keeps the fire going and allows it to spread. As heat is a component of fire, the heat generated by the combustion reaction is used to spread the fire to nearby fuel material. Remember that oxygen is present in the atmosphere. And while fire is initiated by an external heat source, either natural or human-made, it generates heat and spreads as long as fuel and oxygen are available. Fires. I have shared some information with you about the reactions, so now we will go about the nitrogen cycle. And how is it related to fires? Let's find that out. So, the nitrogen cycle. The nitrogen cycle is a process in which nitrogen, N2, is circulated in various forms through nature. Nitrates, NO3, are needed for plants to grow. Charcoal remains of the fire stimulate the formation of nitrates in soil. Bacteria that make nitrates are found in greater amounts in recently burned areas. Nitrogen is processed more quickly through the ecosystem in burned areas than in areas where there was no fire. Wrap up. To wrap up, there are three components for a fire to occur as shown below. They are the oxygen in the air, fuel, and a heat source. The nitrogen cycle is enhanced in areas where fire has occurred. This speeds up the cycling of nitrogen through the ecosystems and enhances plant growth. Fire is a necessary part of nature. Uncontrolled and human-caused fires are a particular concern. Thank you and take care with fire. Namaste.
Thank you, Pranati. That was an awesome introduction into our session today. I myself learned a bunch about fire and the importance of managing fires as well and being responsible with it. So appreciate you for taking that time and extremely well researched. Thank you. Our next topic is going to go more in depth into wildfires specifically, and that will be presented by Aruna Vaidyalingam.
Wildfires, toxic smoke. A brief presentation revolving around the fatal effects wildfire smoke presents on the condition of the human body by Aruna Vaidyalingam. Introduction. Wildfires are known for their destructive ability, mercilessly perishing innocent animals and plants that are in their way. However, in this presentation, you'll explore the recent California wildfires through a unique lens, in a microscopic scale, understanding how particles in the toxic smoke released from the wildfires affect individuals' health and well-being. What we breathe. For every breath we are taking in, we're inhaling oxygen, nitrogen, and carbon dioxide. In fact, the air we breathe up is made up of around 21% oxygen and 78% nitrogen. Carbon dioxide and other gases are also present in smaller quantities within the air. But if you sum it up all in one day, our body is trying to get rid of around 2 pounds of carbon dioxide. And that's just the average. The gases of wildfire smoke. During wildfires, individuals are not only inhaling larger quantities of carbon dioxide, along with other diverse and often toxic gases, but also some microparticles. all packed within the smoke released from this event. But let's step back for a moment. What are microparticles? Microparticles are a mixture of microscopic solids and liquid droplets that are suspended within the air. It is made up of a number of components, including some acids, organic chemicals, metals, soil or dust particles, and allergens like pollen and mold. So what exactly do these substances do? Effect on the lungs. Wildfire smoke can affect your body in a variety of ways, but let's address its effect on your lungs, a vital and significant organ. Wildfire smoke is particularly dangerous for your lungs due to the fact that it could potentially weaken your lungs and create a major blockage in the oxygen flow, posing a severe threat when it comes to being able to breathe properly. Allow me to paint a picture. Visualize microscopic particles that are entering your body. As these particles speed and transport themselves to your airways, irritating your organs and entering your lungs, the cells in your lungs will produce a stronger and stickier form of mucus to trap these particles. Despite that mucus is supposed to protect your lungs, because these particles are incredibly small, this process will tremendously increase the clogging within your lungs, making it even more difficult to breathe. How the body responds to this. So how exactly does the human body respond to this? What happens? Well, the smoke particles are swept up by the brush-like cilia, a special type of cell that is located within your lungs. Resultantly, you cough persistently, and your lungs swell and inflame. The muscles surrounding your lungs wrap tightly around your lungs, making this whole process even more painful. How does smoke affect your blood? Now, let's transition into a new aspect concerning the health impacts of wildfire smoke. As you know, your lungs have to inhale oxygen and exhale carbon dioxide at a certain rate such that your blood can maintain a certain level of acidity. Allow me to further elaborate on that. Your blood is a liquid, meaning it can dissolve certain gases and substances, including carbon dioxide. When more of this carbon dioxide is dissolved in the blood, it forms a new substance called carbonic acid. This increased quantity of carbonic acid increases the acidity of your blood. How does smoke affect your blood? Part 2. Let's take a closer look at acidity. The acidity of a substance is determined by making a measurement of something called the pH. The increased carbonic acid in the blood lowers the value of the blood pH. However, your blood is a special type of fluid that attempts to keep the pH from deviating too much under normal circumstances. However, when exposed to large quantities of carbon dioxide, you have so much carbon dioxide dissolved in your blood that your body just isn't able to keep the pH within acceptable levels. What happens to our body? So overall, what are some highlights of what happens to our body? Levels of other substances like chloride, potassium, calcium, and sodium also change to unacceptable levels as the blood pH changes. Your breathing rate, blood pressure, and heart rate also increases, and lots of other changes occur in your body which are not so good for your well-being. Overall, wildfire smoke presents a serious threat on our well-being by endangering our body in various ways. Here's a quick summary of what was covered within this presentation. Wildfire smoke is packed with toxic gases, including carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, and microparticles, including acids, organic chemicals, dust particles, and allergens. These toxic chemicals make it harder to breathe and end up clogging your lungs. As a result, your lungs swell and inflame, and you cough repetitively. The CO2 packed in the smoke also increases the acidity of your blood when it dissolves in the form of carbonic acid. This decreases the pH of the blood and implements major changes on your body. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Aruna. That was a great intro and explanation into wildfires. And we will continue our presentation with a discussion specifically around the California wildfires, done by Vigneshwari Shivakumar.
Namaste. I am Vigneshwari, and today I'll be talking about why do wildfires occur in California. We know that wildfires happen in forests, and they happen quite commonly in California. We know that there are forests in many parts of the world. However, in this study, we are looking specifically at factors that cause the California wildfires. So, at a glance, wildfires in California can happen at any time of the year. However, those in the fall tend to be the most destructive. This is partly due to the increasing influence of offshore winds in the fall. Another reason is the state's distinct dry season in the summer that extends into the early fall. Dry lightning is one of the common natural causes of wildfire. As no precipitation occurs during this type of lightning, it can produce a spark that can start a fire. High winds that fan the flames. So here we have two winds, high winds, and these winds are what that typically kick into gear. So, according to scientist Janel, he says, in September and October, we begin seeing high pressure developing over the Great Basin, and this creates dry, warm offshore winds. Since the Great Basin is nominally 4,000 feet in elevation, the air is compressed as it descends to sea level, warming and drying it. When this flow is forced over mountains and through canyons, it accelerates. So therefore, these winds can whip an existing wildfire or a wildfire that just developed. This can start even more spot fires in heavily populated areas. Another factor is dry climate or drought. So dry climatic conditions or drought can lead to wildfires. During this time, there is little moisture in the air and on the ground, and the vegetation also dries up. Thus, the conditions are ideal for starting a fire. So here I have a graph which shows the rainfall trend and shows that from January till April, we have a lot of rain, but slowly it starts decreasing once it comes to May. And from May to September, October, you have little to no rain. And you can see that right over here. So from May to June, all the way till October, we have little to no rain, which shows that during this time is when the wildfires occur the most because we have little rain. And we also have another piece of data which is on the temperature. We can see that alongside with the little rain, we also have high temperatures. So because of these factors, these are very ideal for a wildfire to start. And I also have another graph over here which shows that from the past 10 to 15 years, there were more droughts which resulted in more fires. So the more droughts there were, more fires occurred. So there's also another factor which is the human aspect. Human actions have been recorded as a significant cause of wildfires in California. Various causes, both intentional and accidental, such as arson, unintended campfires, fireworks, cigarettes, cars, and power lines have contributed to this increase in the number of fires. So this fall, we witnessed a wildfire in California. And this wildfire was caused by the gender reveal party. This shows the human aspect, where this family used very explosive fireworks. And this actually resulted in this actually had a result of this wildfire. And because the climate was also dry, this was very ideal for starting that wildfire. Also, less manpower in 2020 due to COVID inhibited California firefighting efforts. California has traditionally used prison workers to help with the firefighting, but because of the COVID, some prisons were opened up and some prisoners were allowed to serve their sentences from home. And this was done in an effort to socially distance the prisoners and lessen the spread of COVID. But because these prisoners were opened up, we didn't have enough people to fight this fire. So, a recap. Wildfires start particularly because of lightnings. They start in California during the dry season. They become more dangerous and worse because of the dry winds like the Santa Ana or Diablo. There are some human aspects like the way this wildfire started because of the gender reveal party. So, I did a computer simulation. And this online simulation is a statistical application that can be used to study the various factors that can affect the spread of forest fires. I used variations in wind speed to show the trends in the spread of the forest fires. And fires depend on other factors such as the forest density, the direction of the winds, and the area where the fire started. But I didn't study those aspects. I just looked at the wind speed, how it affects the fire. So here is how it actually looked on my simulation. Over here, you could see that I kept the wind control very low. And here is what the result is over here. This is the result. And you could see that less area was burned when the wind speed was very low compared to when the wind speed was high. More area was burned. And you can also see statistically when the wind speed was very low, only 1.4% of the trees were burned. But when the wind speed was high, 16.8% of the trees were burned. So this shows that the faster or the higher the wind speed, the more area or the more forests are burned. In summary, California is designed to burn. Wildfires are not always destructive. Rather, wildfires are helpful for many organisms. The fire can help produce ash, which can serve as a fertilizer for plants. Some plants require the fire to germinate or activate the seeds. Wildfires are part of the life cycle for these organisms. Forests grow, wildfire occurs, forests grow again, and so on. There are many animals that do get hurt in these fires, but there are other animals that actually gain from this, like predators who can find prey from fleeing animals. The way California's forests are designed, the density, the winds, and the climate, all are the main reasons why the wildfire occurs. Humans can take some action to save people and property, and these include government policies and defensible space. Thank you, and I hope you enjoyed this presentation.
Thank you very much, Vigneshwari. Thus far, we've had 3 presentations. The first talking about fire and its effects, the second talking about wildfires and the effects it can have on humans, and just now we saw specifics about the California wildfires. And across all of these 3 presentations, I think we've learned that there can be some very strong benefits to wildfires for the ecosystem at large, and some that are very, very toxic for the ecosystem at large. And we're going to see a little bit more how wildfires can affect animals, which is what our next topic is going to be, and presented by Kavya Bhatt.
Hello, my name is Kavya Bhatt, and today I'll be discussing animals and forest fires. Wildfires can be destructive and frightening. As humans, we can call for help. But what about the animals who live in those forests? How do they try to survive a wildfire? How many survive? Can some animals benefit from a burned forest? Many animals, mainly mammals, run away from the fire. Animals like elk and deer run to lakes, streams, and other bodies of water to try and protect themselves from the fire. Birds fly away from the fire. Even insects run as fast as they can away from the flames. An example quote from National Geographic. Gabriel D'Estrasio, a bush firefighter in Australia, who said in 2014 that he has witnessed mass movements of small invertebrates fleeing blazes. You get overrun by this wave of creepy crawlies walking ahead of the fire, he said. Small animals like lizards, frogs, and snakes hide under rocks, bury themselves or burrow in dirt, or hide in logs to protect themselves from the dangerous flames of the fire. This helps them find protection from the fire fast, because they can't run away like the larger, faster animals. Fish temporarily swim away from places where fire has caused the water temperature to increase, as many fish that only survive in cold water can no longer live there. What about animals that perish in wildfires? Koalas try to get away from forest fires by climbing up trees, because that is what their instinct tells them to do. Koalas trap themselves in the fire and largely end up dying. Many fish don't swim away in time and die from being cooked in the waters heated by the fire. Additionally, sick, younger, and older wildlife are less likely to survive forest fire than healthier animals. Forest fires are not just exclusively destructive to all animals. For example, many animals benefit from forest fires. Predators like bears, raccoons, and raptors use forest fires as an opportunity to hunt for food by chasing animals fleeing the forest. They go to areas that have just been burned to find injured animals to eat. Raptors hunt small animals that now have less spots to hide from predators. There are other ways animals can benefit from wildfires. Small animals and insects use dead trees as homes. For example, wood wasps use the dead trees to lay their eggs. Black-backed woodpeckers find bark beetles that live in dead trees to eat. Furthermore, animals like woodpeckers, reptiles, deer, and elk thrive better in young forests because young forests produce more resources that are needed for survival. We understand that forest fires do not kill all animals who live in forests. There are a diverse set of animals that are able to survive forest fires. In fact, forest fires are beneficial to some wildlife. As global warming becomes more significant, the forest fire season in California has increased from 5 months to more than 7 months. If there isn't enough time for the wildlife to recover, then that could really hurt some species of plants and animals. Increased knowledge and awareness can help. Thank you!
Thank you, Kavya. That was awesome and really, really insightful into the effects of wildfires on animals. Our next topic is going to talk about the flora and fauna that are specifically involved and affected by forest fires, and that will be narrated by Yashas Palguri.
Forest fires. Human responsibility. Human influence on forest fires. Humans who choose to live in and around the forest area are able to affect the spread of wildfires by designing their living space appropriately. Homes provide combustible material for fires, and human ignorance is often the cause of the spark, which is the root of the fire in the first place. Defensible space. Homes built in the forest area should consider steps to protect the property and surrounding lands. This defensible space around the property is a buffer between it and the wilderness. This buffer area eliminates direct contact with the flame and lessens radiant heat from the wilderness to contact the property and vice versa. Defensible spaces can be created using drainage, irrigation, fire-resistant plants, planting strategies, and a well-maintained garden. There are many designs for defensible spaces around properties near the wilderness. In this design, there is an immediate zone, an intermediate zone, and an extended zone. In the immediate zone, there are no plants or trees. In the intermediate zone, there are a few fire-resistant trees. And in the extended zone, we can see a wide variety of fire-resistant shrubs and trees. Policy and regulations. For decades, loggers have been able, under U.S. policy, to cut down trees in certain forests. With selective logging, only high-value species are felled for timber. But in this process, many smaller trees are damaged and sometimes felled. This debris produces more fuel for the fire over a larger area. Some loggers are not properly cleaning up the area of the debris. Areas where trees are chopped are in wide patches. Also, the lack of trees causes bushes to light on fire. The trees also do regrow, but they do not grow at the same rate or to the same size. This type of growth is also staggered, so there's a lot of fuel in these wide patches for the fire. In conclusion, even though forest fires are deadly and sometimes inevitable, there are many things we could do to help prevent these destructive occurrences. Firstly, we could create defensible space around homes in the forest. And second, we can enact policy. New legislation can be passed restricting logging practices that result in increasing forest density. Thank you.
Thank you, Yashas. So thus far, we've talked about the effects of fire, wildfires, the California wildfires, some of the animals affected, and also some of the human responsibility that we have to contain and avoid forest fires. Now we'll talk about some of the plants that are affected during these wildfires, specifically pyrophyte and pyrophile plants, narrated by Harshvita Parthasarthi. Thank you.
Hello, I am Hashvita Parthasarthi, and today I'll be talking about the topic of pyrophyte and pyrophile plants, plants that survive and flourish in wildfires. So what even are pyrophytes, you may ask? Pyrophytes are defined as plants that are known to tolerate the fires. There are two different types of pyrophytic plants that act in two divergent ways. There are active pyrophytes which have evolved oils to increase more combustion, and there are passive pyrophytes that use specific growth adaptations like thick bark or high moisture content to resist the incoming fire. So what are the amazing adaptations of these pyrophytic plants? Number 1 is resprouting. Number 2 is prolific flowering. And number 3 is thermal insulation. Resprouting and prolific flowering. Number 1, resprouting. Plants that use the adaptation resprouting are called resprouters. Although wildfires destroy vegetation in its paths, pyrophytes have used the process of resprouting to grow back. Resprouters, like the eucalyptus, have special buds that are under the bark of their trunks. When the trees are burnt, the specialized buds can produce new leaves and branches. This is shown in the top picture. Number 2, prolific flowering. These plants can flower prolifically after a fire. The visible fire spikes of the tree shows that it survived the blazing heat of the fires. Even species being grown individually in greenhouses are often blowtorched to encourage the growth of flowers. One plant that showcases this adaptation is the Australian grass tree. This is shown in the lower picture. Last but not least, thermal insulation. Number 3, thermal insulation. Plants can survive fire due to their thermal insulation, which is provided in dead leaves, moist tissues, or bark. One example. Trees like the sequoia have very thick fire-retardant bark and can be directly burned without damaging the vital tissues of the tree. So now we are going on to pyrophiles. So what are pyrophiles? But some plants need an environmental trigger like fire. These plants have fire-activated seeds. Plants like these are called pyrophiles. Pyrophiles use an adaptation called serotyny. Serotyny in botany usually means following or later. Pyrophile plants and fire-activated seeds. Plants like eucalyptus and banksia have serotinous cones, meaning their cones are sealed with resin. And the cones can only release their seeds once a fire approaches, because the fire has the heat to melt the resin coated around the cones. So eventually, causing the seeds to be released and to germinate. There are also several other species that need a chemical element from a fire, like the smoke, or a charred element, like charcoal, to disturb the seed dormancy. Some plants can even be in the soil for years waiting for a fire to strike, which awakens them. Therefore, it is clear that fires are an important part of reproduction for some species of plants. So down here you can see a eucalyptus plant, and that is heated. All in all, in brief, wildfires don't destroy all plant material. Some species of plants need the fire as an environmental trigger for survival. These are the amazing adaptations of these plants. The sight of a fire destroying everything in its path is horrifying. But learning about plants that have adapted means of fire survival and plants that have adapted fire-dependent reproduction is truly heartwarming and encouraging. So I hope you learned a thing or two from this presentation. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Harshvita. I think from all the presentations that we've seen thus far, it just heightens the importance that we have as human beings to understand the impacts that some of our actions can have, not just on ourselves, but also on the ecosystem and the plants and the animals that inhabit this world with us as well. To kind of wrap off our program today, we have a computer simulation done by Kavya Bhatt, and that will be the next segment. Here we go.
So hello, my name is Kavi Baha, and today I'm going to be presenting my computer simulation data. So to get this data, I used an interactive simulation called Directable Fires. With this simulation, you can simulate a forest fire, and you can vary the forest size, the forest density, the wind speed, and the wind direction. So here's the first graph. It shows the percent burned versus the wind direction. So on the x-axis, you can see the different wind directions, north, east, south, and west. And for the y-axis, you can see the percent burned. Now each of the different bars is color-coded to stand for a different thing. The red is a small forest with low wind speed. The maroon is a small forest with high wind speed. The olive green is a medium forest with low wind speed. The denim blue is a medium forest with high wind speed. The blue is a large forest with low wind speed. And the orange is a large forest with high wind speed. So as you can see, whenever there's a lower wind speed, much less of the forest is burned than when there's a higher wind speed. And this is true for all the different sizes of forests, as well as in every single direction. So for this one, we kept the density of the forest at 50%. So for the next graph, we're going to be changing up the density. And since the information is overall the same for all the different wind directions, the wind direction will be kept as north. So here you can see on the x-axis the different percent density of the forest at 25, 50, 75, and 100%. And you can see the percent of the forest burned on the y-axis. Now all the bars still have their same color codes. And as you can see, with the 25%, very little of the forest is burned with that little density. And almost the same thing is same for the 50%. But at the 75 and 100%, where the forest is much denser, a lot more of the forest is burned. This shows that the denser the forest, the more the forest will burn, which means that the forest will become very big and harder to control. As humans, we can help. What we can do is we can do control logging. We can keep the trees a little farther apart from each other so it's harder for the fire to spread. And if the fire doesn't spread as much, it'll be easy to put out and not much wildlife will be harmed. So as you can see, with the appropriate use of legislation to address locations where homes are built, the appropriate use of legislation to regulate logging policies, and the appropriate use of defensible space for dwellings in forest areas, we as humans can impact wildfires and we can control the spread. Thank you.
Thank you, Kavya. And now we have reached more or less the end of our program today. So the first vote of thanks goes first and foremost to the students who have spent countless hours researching and putting together some amazing material for all of us to learn more about these wildfires. Secondly, without the help and support of their parents, these students would never have the opportunity to, really engage in their interests and learn and present such great information. Next, the brains behind the whole operation and the engine that really helps these students, the teacher, Dr. Malini Ravi, thank you very much, who's a science teacher at the Patasala, who has really helped bring this whole program together with the students. I'd also like to thank the Patasala coordinators and the backstage coordinators for making this program possible. Lastly, thank you to Dr. Uma Maisurkar and the Hindu Temple Society of North America for providing us this platform for our community. And finally, to you, the audience, for tuning in and supporting the temple and supporting our students today. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.